Welcome to this live webinar, How Do You Lead Your Culture Now? We're recording the webinar to share afterwards with you and anyone not able to join. Today we are here with two of Axialent's culture transformation experts, Thierry de Beyssac and Anabel Dumlao, and also Tim Kuppler, Director of Culture and Organizational Development at Human Synergistics. We will be discussing the importance of intentionally managing culture and leadership development in an integrated way. We will host a Q&A at the end of the session. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can write them to us in the questions tab, and we'll answer as many as possible at the end of the webinar. So over to you, Tim, Thierry, and Anabel. Could you turn on your cameras, please?
Hello, good morning and good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Well, hello, everyone. Looking forward to this great webinar. So one of the top questions we've been seeing across social media regarding culture is how the pandemic is influencing culture. So what should leaders be doing about culture during these challenging times?
Wow, big question. You know what, Tim? What is really changing with this pandemic is the culture change itself. Today, culture is changing at, as everybody knows, accelerated pace everywhere, intentionally or unconsciously, for good or for bad. We see it happening in few months where it usually took 3 to 4 years. It is happening from all levels of the organization, not only and exclusively from the top leaders. This is new. Concretely, people change or are changing the way they do things at work or even at home. It is their conscious response or unconscious reaction to the crisis. And they do it based on their perception of how they can or should think, act, and interact in this hyper-VUCA environment, right? So these past 8 months, we also, I think, people from the ground taking great initiatives and in 1 week doing things that they were used to do in 1 month. In 1 month, what they were used to do in 3 months. And in 6 months, what we thought was impossible to do or to achieve in less than a couple of years, let's say, right? So, you know what? The point is, when you look at how they did things, is they often did it by breaking the established rules, by questioning the status quo, and overpassing the usual bureaucratic hierarchy. So I see this as a unique opportunity for leaders to reconsider their role and contribution in this context of culture change. Don't you, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that's important to understand is what's going on now is really we're seeing emerging patterns of new behavior, and the jury's still out about whether these things will be entrenched in the culture or if leaders will kind of drift back to pre-pandemic systems, structures, and leadership approaches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. For example, a financial services client of ours was actually marveled at how they managed their first ever budgeting process to be completed in record time, 100% remotely during this pandemic. Before COVID, if they were asked, they'd say that was impossible because of their current culture of consensus. You know, there was so much back and forth to get the overall budget done. Somehow, as Thierry said, you know, they thought it was impossible to do this remotely, or that it would take longer without the face-to-face people dynamics. But they actually did it successfully and in a shorter time frame during the crisis. So why did a virus have to hit to have them realize what it takes to do this, right? Ultimately, we believe that it's because their prevailing culture of consensus was hinged on unspoken belief. You know, in a way, the leaders were silently expected to do the back and forth dance gracefully, right? The up and rising leaders learn it from their elders, so to speak, and so on and so forth. But those expectations shifted during this crisis, and there was no more time for the dance, right? So in a way, they granted themselves permission to go against the mainstream culture and achieved a favorable outcome. So, however, to your point, Tim, the question still remains whether the dance will come back in style in the next normal, or whether the new practice is here to stay. But my point is, you can either do as my client, who almost let this slip as just an anecdote, right? Or you can capitalize it, right? The least you can do is celebrate it. And even better, right? Capture what the teams have learned, listen to their lessons, and make this count. And it's not as simple as, okay, let's just do this way moving forward. To lead this effectively, I think you must ask the hard questions, like, what did we do differently? At the expense of what, right? And how do we make this sustainable moving forward when the context changes? Not if the context changes, but when it does.
Yeah, those are great points. Reflection's so important. So what else? What else should leaders be specifically doing about culture during these challenging times?
Well. Here I will probably share 3 advices to the top leaders. I would love to share more, but the 3 key advices will be: number 1, the first one, to leaders: be conscious about the current culture changes that are happening in your organization, right and wrong. Measure it, give it names, so everybody speaks the same language. That's the first one. The second one, very much in line with what you said, Anabel, is make this change intentional, meaningful, consistent, because today the change we can see is not consistent, right? And the third one will be accept that your role as a leader might not be anymore to take the driver's seat of this rally, but just the co-pilot one. In this decentralized context, your role is not to drive it. It's just to enable your people to continue to drive this change in a structured way with a clear and shared direction. So basically, put and let your employees in the driver's seat. That would be my 3 advices. 2 pesos.
Well, it doesn't sound like your advice would be much different if we didn't have a pandemic. So what is unique about the circumstances right now, and how should we be taking advantage of it?
I would say that what is really new and different is that the cascading of the culture change down to the lowest levels of the organization needs to be much more interactive than before. As I said, a lot of change is currently coming from the bottom of the organization in different ways, absolutely inconsistent, great initiatives, right? And we at Axialent had to design completely new digital accelerated culture change program, fostering a bottom-up escalation of the staff concrete experiences and challenges in their day-to-day work. They have to share their experience. They have to share how they did it, how they did in 1 week what they were supposed to do in 1 month, or in 1 month what they were supposed to do in 3 months, how they made it possible, how they got this resilience now. So we designed a series of 6 to 10 webinars of 3 hours, for example, on the ongoing culture change at all levels when people actually were feeling saturated and overwhelmed, some of them close to burnout. And amazingly enough, they unanimously admitted that it was the right time to do it and the best use of their time, making them much stronger and more comfortable at dealing with their personal and professional VUCA environment. I'm sure, Tim, that you probably have other examples of companies trying to better understand how the current crisis was impacting their culture. And I have in mind the Culture Mirror initiative at Human Synergy Systems. I'm sure you have some good experiences to share with us, no?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been just fascinating to see what organizations have learned through this brief culture mirror survey and process they've been using, because many see these constructive patterns of behavior, emerging in their organizations where leaders might be more empathetic, listening, being a bit more humane, including people in decisions more. And the smart ones know that, hey, this isn't just happening by chance, right? We're doing some things different here that are encouraging these patterns if they're persisting. So, one example from a bank was that they really pointed to things they changed with how they were conducting meetings and holding senior staff meetings more frequently, more structured, checking in with people and the health of their team at the beginning, turning it over to HR at the start when HR used to go last or, down the sequence. So, and then they also implemented many new teams to manage things in an accelerated rate, like starting a new loan program in days that would have taken months before. So the real key is to engage your team in disciplined and planned reflection about what behavior is emerging and how that's helping and hindering progress with some of your most critical priorities. I mean, I think that's really the heart of what we want to do in this difficult time.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. And actually, I'm curious to hear from the audience, right? So it's great to have all of you out there, even if we don't see you because your cameras are off, but we'd love to hear from you. So here's another QR code that you can scan with your smartphone, or if not, you can go to your browser and visit www.menti.com and input the code that you see on your screen, 384619, okay? And so you can answer the question that you see there. Go ahead. We're asking you, to what extent have you perceived an underlying culture change in the last 8 months at your organization? Okay, we're giving you 4 options. Could be a dramatic change, significant change, incremental change, or just limited change, okay? Please go ahead. Ooh, all right. And we're beginning to see how the answers are coming in. All right, seems we have a quorum, although we still have some voters that are a bit shy. We are seeing a perceived incremental change, followed by significant change. Oops, it's now a tie. Significant change is catching up with incremental change. All right. Well,
That's
now it's
really,
winning. Now
really
the scales are tilting towards significant change. Wow, interesting. Thank you very much for voting. And now answer this next question. Oh, all right, still getting even more significant. Now, is that significant change in your perception here to stay? Okay, so the options here are easier. Yes, no, I have no clue. Oh, wow, overwhelming. Okay. Oh, it's here to stay. The vast majority, a few of you are clueless, but the vast majority think among our audience that this significant change is here to stay. Lovely. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, this is really very, very interesting. I definitely share the opinion of it is here to stay based on what I can see with our clients. Actually, another next question will be, is this change managed intentionally? You know, is it leveraged to become sustainable as a growth driver for your people and for your business? Is it going to the right direction? But one thing is sure, it's very interesting to see that half of the audience said a dramatic and significant change, and 2/3 saying it is here to stay. Wow, big deal.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that 90% basically see the change, and that so many believe it's here to stay. I know I would be in the I don't know camp, just because there's so much change right now, and as we get to more normal circumstances, do we drift back? You know, is the jury still out, or have we totally committed to some of the changes and improved approaches that we're implementing? You know, it's going to be interesting to see. But let's take the poll down, and now we'll move on with a few other topics. So let's dive a little deeper on leadership. How do you approach leadership development in a way that will actually influence or impact culture?
Oh, you know, very consistently with what I said before. Concretely, our leadership programs about transforming their leadership style for those top leaders. And I would say 3 changes. So number 1 is moving them away from a kind of central command and control posture to a kind of coaching leadership role with the mindset of servant leaders. You know, since the change is coming from the bottom of the organization, you know, they have to be here to enable people to change. So the aim for them is to become change enablers fostering this bottom-up change management process and not solely their traditional top-down approach. It's about empowering their people with accountability, of course, delegating decisions and control to the closest points of action. And as a third point, I would say it's about building a psychological safety environment, where trust, self-confidence, productive feedback, and open communication are the norm, which is not the case in most of the organization. So what we are saying is new mindsets, new behaviors, new skills, and a completely new role and approach for many of those top leaders, And I think that focus should be on, one, giving sense and purpose to the change. This is what people need today in this VUCA environment, in this uncertainty kind of context. Number two, creating awareness on the case for change. What's in it for me, for us as a community, and for the business and for society, And the third point, as change enablers, their job is once again to help their people find their own desired driver for this change. Help them decide to get out of their comfort zone, but by themselves, not because you're going to try to have a beautiful storytelling. Let's make sure that your people have their own storytelling. What do you think, Anabel, about that?
Oh, yeah, I agree. And this sounds simple on the surface, but underlying this shift is a profound transformation of the basic skills that most leaders have developed throughout their entire career. So let me try to, get my point across in a way. So try this. All of you, okay? All of you out there in the audience as well. Don't worry, just humor me for a while. Cross your arms. Come on, no one's watching. It's just Tim, Thierry, and myself who might make a fool of themselves. But okay, so which arm, when you cross your arms, I don't think you gave a lot of thought to which arm is on top, but which one do you have on top? In my case, it's the left. Right? Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you to do this leadership shift, okay, with me. Now, on the count of 3, I will ask you to cross your arms again, okay? But this time with the other arm on top, okay? At the count of 3, all of us together, okay? 1, 2, 3. So, so how was that for you?
24 days, here it is.
Was it easy?
No.
Mm-hmm. A little awkward, maybe, right? Do you think it's impossible to do this as quickly as when you did it the first time?
Today, yes.
Not impossible either. So that's the kind of transformation we're talking about here, right? It just takes a little more consciousness to overcome your autopilot tendency of how you've been leading all these years. So this was just a metaphor, but I'm sure, Thierry, that you have real life examples of how leadership development practices can impact culture.
Yeah, actually, it is all about practicing, making it a habit. And, a few of my clients from very different industries around the world spent the past 2 to 4 years working on their renewed corporate mission, vision, values, and culture with some great success, actually. And they clearly recognized that today they would not have been able to deal with the current COVID-19 crisis with the relative success they had or they are having right now without the culture change they went through, right? But now their urgent need and opportunity is to put this new culture into action by their staff on very specific strategic application projects. Let me give you some examples. For example, it is about fostering an agile, entrepreneurial, and innovation-driven culture to be able to reinvent part of their business model 2.0 or 4.0 or whatever, just because a big chunk of their business is dead and will be dead for some time, right? For another one, it's about fostering a full safety culture, something that I've been trying for years, but they really need to do it much better and much quicker. In several other cases that we could see today, it's about using their new culture manifesto to succeed at implementing their new enterprise information system, such as SAP, HANA, or Workday, or any kind of artificial intelligence business model. And you know what? Big deal, big change. And the only way to make it really happen is to apply their culture manifesto. And in all those real cases, I'm talking about coaching leaders create a safe and change-friendly environment by focusing their energy once again, their time, their authority at removing the barriers and obstacles on the one hand, and at supporting their people to keep the step on the accelerator on the other hand. you know. I know you have another very interesting example you would like to share, Anabel. I love this one. Please share it with us.
Yeah, I have one similar to your first example, actually. And it was the journey that one organization that we work with plotted in order to achieve their business vision, right? So these journeys always start with a clear business case, right? And here it was evident that their digital strategy was taking too long to take off. So they were determined to accelerate execution, which was their way of saying that they needed to deliver value to their customers much more quickly and effectively, right? And they were slow to market because their process to develop solutions for their customers was inside out, meaning that they relied on specialized experts in-house to come up with a great idea and then see if the market liked it. By the time they got a good solution out, competitors were everywhere, non-traditional ones, even tiny startups were ahead of them. So they decided to move to adopting agile methodologies that placed the customer at the heart of everything they did, all the way from design to delivery. And it wasn't just the IT folks, it was the entire back end that went agile. And that was a bold move for a company in their sector. So the underlying culture that sustained those silos, where these experts were very comfortable working in, was a culture where the leaders were actually believed and expected to be the smartest of the crowd, but they were the farthest from the customer. So everyone else was at the service of these select few whose decisions shaped execution. But in order to deliver value to the customer as quickly as possible, this could no longer be. So it is the teams, as Thierry said before, right, who are closest to the customers, who had to be empowered to make the right decisions for the organization if their digital strategy was to succeed. And leaders in this scenario were expected to be at their service, not the other way around.
Outstanding, Anabel. That's a great example. Now, one challenge with leadership development I often see is the one size fits all kind of nature that some programs have, where they're not really customized based on a thorough understanding of the underlying culture. So leaders learn many great new things or approaches, but then they go back to their day-to-day work and have to deal with maybe the politics, the drama, the pushback, and other things that are just a natural part of the organizational culture and challenges we run into. So how important is it to customize the approach based on the underlying culture, and how do you approach it?
Well, I cannot agree with you more, Tim. And actually, I think it is key to do just that, because the brilliant leaders who understood the cultural shift I just explained, they were actually quite bewildered when they realized the implications for them, right? Like when they realized that they had to cross their arms differently. So they plotted a parallel journey for themselves as individual leaders and also as leadership teams, right? And this is what Thierry mentioned as the shift from a command and control leadership style to a more servant leadership style. And the drama here was that this shift was not universally supported. Although you may ask yourself, in this day and age, why would you think command and control is something good? Well, try asking a company who belongs to a highly regulated sector, because in that context, control is actually a very good thing. And it took me a lot of empathy and work on my own mindset to realize this, right? So in terms of behavior, the leaders in this organization needed to shift from giving detailed instructions to their teams to empowering them, which was not just letting them do whatever they pleased, right? It meant the leader had to provide a clear vision in view of those detailed instructions and allow the team to come up with the best way to deliver that vision. And that meant moving from teaching them what to do and how to do it to transforming themselves first into the leaders that this new culture required them to be. And that's a lot of work. The transformation had to be rooted in profound mindset shifts and a new order of priority in their values. Like if you valued, for instance, being right, you were more likely to have more problems in this new culture than if you valued learning over being right. And you can see other examples at the bottom of this iceberg, because here is where they find the greatest leverage to transform their leadership styles. That in turn would support the cultural shift, their business strategy required from each and every one of them. So that's a true story, Tim.
That's great. So, so how can you get started? Let's dive into a specific example. And can you share how you would structure an improvement effort, and especially the leadership development, so that it has a direct and sustainable impact on culture? Thierry, you're mute.
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry for that. Maybe it's better sometime. Yeah, sorry. I was thinking at that time about clients who never got to start just because they were talking with different concepts, different languages, and they never got to talk about the same thing. So the number one thing I would suggest to do is measure and put a name on what exactly is changing in the way your people are thinking, acting, and interacting together, today. And this is what we do when using the human synergistic tools, OCI, OEI, for the culture assessment, and also the LSI for the leadership styles, in order for us to connect both. So most of our clients who already use the OCI and OEI and LSI tools in the past 2 years are now asking us to update this analysis. And I would say that this is the right time to do it if you have done it some time ago, or to start doing it if you didn't do it. So right time to do it with the current accelerated changes or needs to change. My number 2 point to start, well, will be spend some time to try to identify what, how, who, where are the actual levers of change. Ask few people, what are the new norms of thinking, acting, and interacting that you perceive as required to overcome the current challenges? Ask them. They are managing it, right? And my 3rd point is clearly define or update what your culture manifesto is. It describes the mental models, the behaviors that your people individually or collectively commit to adopt to intentionally change the way we are doing things here. Basically, as Churchill said, the one thing is just don't let a good crisis go to waste. And I think you can zoom in some of those leadership portion of this journey.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, just as we rely on a robust photo of the current and desired culture, by using the LSI tools from Human Synergistics, we give the leaders a mirror with which they can, look at themselves and compare their intentions and their behaviors with the ideal norms on one hand, as well as with their impact on others, right? And this provides leaders a very powerful reason to change because they see the big picture and they connect the dots. And it also provides us a basis to support them through maybe learning. It could be synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, or one-on-one executive coaching, and maybe even mentoring, right? And when this program that you see there on your screens is offered to an intact leadership team, one that works together on a day-to-day basis, the impact reaches a whole new level. And in this scenario, for instance, support can take the form of shadow coaching or team coaching, which is very impactful. And yeah, this is our approach in a nutshell, Tim.
Great, thank you. So what emerges with an approach like this that can be an obstacle or a challenge, and how do you overcome it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it may sound superfluous, right? But logistics is one of those obstacles because the pandemic has impacted the way companies are willing to deploy this journey, at least in some countries. And we had to swiftly adapt to the possibility of replacing the face-to-face workshops with remotely facilitated instances, and maybe shorter in duration, but in exchange spread over a longer period of time. And this has proven to be a positive move, actually, for most of our clients. What do you see, Thierry?
Well, first, I think that those digital and remote webinars we had to build for our clients, replacing face-to-face. I know many people will disagree with that in theory, but I can tell you, we received the feedback from our clients saying this is here to stay. And probably 70% will be remotely and digital kind of learning and development program, and 30% in person, because there are many things you cannot replace that are happening in person. But to respond to your question, I see 3 things. Number 1 is the need to stop underestimating the importance and the weight of the I dimension. You know, something we have been doing, and more specifically leaders, for years and decades. As a coach and a culture change consultant, I see so many people at all levels close to burnout, who are exhausted, overwhelmed, isolated, or confused in their work, but also in their social life, in their family life, who are extremely anxious regarding their own individual future. So take care of what your own health, mental health, and physical health. So what I'm saying and sharing to companies is your people need support to completely know how to reach their optimal health, optimal mind, optimal productivity, and continuous learning. It is a must. And it is a must for me to have a kind of optimal me support program in any company's people, academy, or leadership university. Being at your best, and this is a message to leaders and managers, being at your best is not anymore a personal choice. Oh, I should do that. This would be great. It would be great for me, for my family. Of course it is. But it is also a business and professional duty and responsibility in the current pandemic. We need you to be at your optimal me, right? So that's a long one, the I dimension. The number two is time. You know what? Business and people leaders are overwhelmed with tasks and responsibilities. They have no time left, and being a coaching leader, as I was saying, takes a lot of time in communication and in supporting others. No, so do what it takes, but just do free up the time you need to do it effectively. How much is it? Depends. Could be 10% or 30% of your time. 10% is half a day a week. It's not nothing. And 30% is 1 day and a half a week. Try to make those days available for coaching and empowering your people and your organization as part of your day-to-day operations. That's your business. That's your duty, right? So that was my second point, time. And the third one will be the other. The other one is probably in this one, the lack of individual and collective trust due to the high level of uncertainty and the isolation of people. And I think it is here to last. And if top leadership does not create a psychological safety environment, and that's my point, it is a premise to free speech, to authentic communication and feedback, to test and learn new things, to take risk and learn from mistakes, to share and overcome vulnerabilities altogether. I mean, it's so important, psychological safety, and this is something really, really that is missing in many organizations.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious again. So I'd love to hear from the audience. In a moment, you'll see here another QR code that you can scan with your smartphones or return to www.menti.com. And in case you came in late, here is the code that you need to input, 384619. And let us know in the last 8 months on which of the 3 dimensions that Thierry mentioned have you been focusing your energy? Have you focused it on the I, on the we, or on the it? Please let us know. Okay, the we is winning by a landslide. We are social, right? No social distancing can keep us apart.
Yeah, but you know what? Wow. When we do this exercise in-person workshop in the past, before the COVID-19, it was 80% it, 20% we, was 0 in I. And of course, people realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at this.
Wow. And Tim, remember you were saying that we saw more resilience, more connections, more empathy today than probably before the COVID-19 in the organizations.
Yeah, and I think more organizations are trying to be intentional about the we, especially in this time where we can't just, assemble in the conference room, during our normal meeting every week or whatever. So it really does take a lot of proactive outreach informally, beyond the group activities.
Speaking of intentional, we'd like to ask you, audience, if you could choose, if you could be intentional about it, where would you focus your energy in the next 8 months moving forward? Okay, let us know.
In the beach.
But you already are beside, by the beach. Come on.
That's true.
All right, Becky, can we start seeing? Still there.
Yeah.
Amazing. This is also a shift from our regular experience with clients. Normally, where they've been focusing their energy in the past changes when they look at the future. But here it seems like, well, a little better on the eye side, like more focus on the eyes, it looks like, than before, but we is still winning a lot. The interpersonal is an area they would like to focus on, even more than the personal and the impersonal.
Yep.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing, everyone.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, we're going to wrap it up with one more important topic, because we know many of our listeners may not be able to just dive right in and launch a major culture and leadership development effort. So they have to get other people on board in some form. So how do you approach that? How do you kind of sell intentional culture and leadership development to others? How do you do it?
Well, I think that eventually it all can begin and end with you, right? I would say focus on what you can do today. Like if it's speaking up about this at your next all hands meeting, or bringing up the topic with your peers in your next executive committee, or maybe it's weaving it into your game plan 2021 with your direct reports. Like, as we say at Axialent, what you focus on expands, or others would say, where your attention goes, energy flows. Whatever it may be, my recommendation would be conscious, pay attention, get curious, and take it from there. What would you recommend, Thierry?
my basic suggestion would be, why don't you share this webinar recording with your top leadership team as a pre-work for their own reflection on what, why, how, and who is changing in their organization. Help them to try to identify and share with them concrete examples of people, heroes, who are making this crisis or VUCA environments resilience, and anti-heroes, with concrete examples of obstacles, blockers, barriers, put on the brake that are undermining this constructive change. Tim, would you say, and would you suggest that this is still the right time to launch a culture mirror process that might convince those leaders and others that their culture is already changing, they like it or not, consciously or unconsciously, and that anyway, it will be a wise decision to do it intentionally?
Absolutely. So the culture mirror survey and process is an option, especially for teams that are trying to regroup and unite around some revised strategies or plans. Some big things are shifting. We are seeing a shift, though, now where people are really starting to plan for 2021. So they're opting for the deeper approach to do the more thorough culture and climate assessment as an input to more comprehensive leadership development, strategic planning, and other areas. And then, of course, they're customizing that strategic planning, leadership development, and other things based on this much clearer understanding of culture. We believe that the key is this disciplined reflection, learning, and improvement that's customized based on an understanding of culture. That's really the key. So let's turn it over to the audience now and open it up for some questions.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Thierry. Thanks, Anabel. Super interesting. We have had loads of questions. And just to let you know, if you've got any questions, if you want to ask anything, write it into the questions tab, and we're going to try to get to as many as possible at the time available. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for a few more questions to come in, we'd love you to answer this quick poll. You can choose more than one option, and we'll then move on to the Q&A section. So I'll just give you a few minutes to respond, and Then we'll get to the questions. Oh, we're receiving a lot of positive feedback. Thank you. You can also contact us by email. We're going to be reaching out to you shortly with the recording of this session too. Okay, so I'll close this now, and we're getting a few more responses. I'll ask the first question from Christy. So we saw in the first Mentimeter, we asked whether people had seen a shift in culture and whether they thought that that was here to stay. The question is, do the viewers want the changes in the culture or not? They were clear that the changes would continue. Is this good?
I think the.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I think they were asking.
You didn't hear. I'll ask again, Anabel. Do the viewers want the changes in the culture or not? They were clear that the changes would continue. Is this good?
Well, it's hard to say whether it's good or not good. The results are still, as Tim said, the jury is still out. If it is here to stay and you have positive outcomes, then I would say in the test and learn mentality, and in a culture where you're having test probes out and you are iteratively learning and incorporating and integrating feedback as to what is working and not working, then if the response and the outcomes are positive, then it is good. Continue, go on, right? So if we think that it is here to stay and we are not getting the positive outcomes that we want, then abort or pivot or change courses, right? So that's my take. It's not good or bad per se. It's, are you achieving the outcomes that you want or not? And you have a choice to correct course.
And either way, it seems like the key is taking that pause and reflecting and getting that feedback, because so often we're charging forward, and if things are going well, we don't reflect and understand why and build on that. If there's challenges, we just change our approach versus really reflecting and figuring out, well, why didn't this plan play out like we had originally intended? So yeah, we don't know if it's good or bad, but we have to know that it's important to take the time to pause and unite our team.
I would say we might not know, but you should know in your organization. Your top leaders should know if it's good or bad. And if it is, where it is good, you need to support them. Where it is bad, you need to correct them. That's simple. And this is why, again, you need to identify where did we have our heroes making the impossible possible during this period, because we're going to need them, and you can be sure they are exhausted. And where do we need to support and help our people who took maybe unconsciously a kind of victim posture, a kind of learner posture. I don't want to learn anything else. A kind, of avoidance to reality. So just do your job. Identify why you need to act and how.
Great. Thanks, Thierry. Moving quickly on to the next question, trying to get to as many as possible. A question now from Amy. How have you convinced leaders to invest in measurement such as the culture mirror?
Don't respond, Tim, because you are the guy who is selling this. How many times we have all said, you just manage what you can measure. And once again, I had some clients who have been talking about this for years without doing anything, and for only one single reason. They were talking about different things, and they were not measuring what they were talking about. So, I mean, this is very, very critical. And you need a mirror to see where you are and how you are doing. So now maybe, Tim, you can be more specific.
Well, and what we've found, quote, sells it the most is just reflecting as a group qualitatively and seeing the richness that's there as people reflect on what's really working and not, and then thinking about, well, how do we do this across hundreds or thousands of people and do it in an efficient way? And that's where, using a tool to bring a common language and measure and understand these constructive, aggressive, passive elements and what's helping, what's hindering, can make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I find a very powerful question in challenging back and asking leaders, like, how do you know? Do you have the data? Are you just acting on hunches, intuitions, or are you acting on data? So the question would be, how do you know?
Excellent.
Excellent question, thanks. So Teresa is asking, what is the greatest leadership challenge due to culture change behavior?
The greatest.
That's a great question. The greatest, I don't think the greatest is universal. Like, okay, the most prevalent challenge is, I think the greatest is one, and it's a unique challenge for each and every individual leader. The greatest is always still to come. There's always, if you adopt a lifelong learning mindset, the challenges are just, getting greater and greater. And that's not a bad thing, mind you, at least in my perspective.
I would say, I'm much more assertive, and I would say, yeah, there is one. One is to be able to build vulnerability-based trust, starting with yourself. How many CEOs we are coaching who have some difficulties to accept or to make their people accept that they don't know everything, they don't know it all anymore. They don't control everything. Change is so quick, so dramatic, complexity is so high, uncertainty is so big, ambiguity is so strong that they need to accept their vulnerability, their own vulnerabilities as CEOs. I don't know it all. I just cannot control it all. I cannot make decisions. I don't know the solutions, And first accept it for yourself. Then make it acceptable for your people, right? And fostering this vulnerability of psychological safe environment that will make everyone comfortable with this. So then we can take some postures that are player postures, learner postures, delegation to the closest point of action to people, and so on and so forth. I think this is the biggest challenge for them. This is my personal view. Tim?
Those sound good to me.
Okay, thanks. Thierry, this is a question for you. David asks, you mentioned a common language for improving performance. Can you speak more to that?
Oh, thank you, David, for this question. How long do you have? Specific language is, it's about methodology, it's about high performance. For me, a cohesive, aligned, and high-performing team, then you have to share some concepts. What we do is we use the conscious business concepts, about, for example, having the mindsets of being a player versus a victim, being a learner versus a knower, using open and authentic communication, impeccable coordination. So we have a full program about these language concepts, mindsets, behaviors that allow us to build high-performing teams, right? So when you do that, people know exactly what you are doing. When you try to have those people having productive confrontations or conflicts, they know all the methodologies and the language. So this is the one we use. Maybe Anabel, you want to complement it?
Yes, absolutely. We also use the human synergistics language and vocabulary in a way. So we follow, let's say, the ground rules from an author called Roger Schwartz also, that make sure that you define what important words mean. So everybody has the same understanding, right or wrong, but at least they're on the same page with what is culture here and why does it matter to us here. So we start with something very simple, like a glossary of terms. What does this mean here? So when people talk about empowerment, so what is empowerment? What is it and what is it not? It's giving a vision. It's not giving detailed instructions. Empowerment is not letting them do whatever they want. It boils down to very simple behaviors that you can observe. If you just talk about it, it's big, big words. So those big, important words, we have to write down in a simple glossary what they mean to us here.
Yeah, those are great answers. And I think sometimes people misinterpret the use of our surveys as well. That's going to bring the language to everything, when it's really the other way around. When you're engaging with team members and maybe some of the frustrations or patterns or issues they're talking about, come to the surface, using our tools can help bring a common language to some of those things. And yes, that fear of speaking up and these norms related to just going along with things, right? Not being proactive and listening and being curious, right? We can measure some of those things and understand how they vary by groups and kind of zero in on a from to shift in the culture that we feel we need to support effectiveness, whether that's in general or with specific priorities like customer experience or innovation or some other outcome.
Or even more basic than that, Tim. We have clients who always speak in terms of the LSI and OCI, like, hey, we're being red right now, or hey, let's try to be blue instead of just doing the pendulum effect to the green. So those also become important words in a culture shift.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Great question. Thank you. Thanks, David. So we're almost at time. I think we've probably got time if our speakers cooperate for 2 more questions. First from Mary, she says, I'm a bit confused with the it dimension. Can you say more to this?
Yeah, the it dimension, I'm used to it, the business dimension. I mean, the it is the task, the objectives, the financial and economic results. So the it is what we want to achieve as a company, which is from the business perspective, EBITDA, productivity, quality, client satisfaction, market share, all those KPIs that are representing one of the dimension of the company, compared with the we, which is about how we work together with productive harmony, collaboration, and so on, and the high, where each one is part of this and motivated, committed, and doing and showing his or her best. So the it is the business perspective, I would say. Is that okay with you, Anabel and Tim?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you, Thierry. So final question from Jose Alfonso, in terms of cultural change or shift, good or bad, and focusing on the we, what do you recommend to capitalize on the positive when an organization is too spread around geographically and personal closeness is complex, especially in the service or educational industry?
Wow. Yeah, we've learned a lot about that. We had our own preconceived ideas of what it meant to connect person to person, right? We ourselves at Axialent, we told ourselves the story that we create magic in the room when there's physical contact with the participants in our journeys. And COVID taught us otherwise. We actually were stretched to discover in ourselves and in our participants in our journeys that, hey, we can also connect through a screen, but it takes working on how you view that interaction. If we go to the video conference with camera off and we're not going to connect through a screen, I need to see you face to face. If that's what's in our mind, that's what's going to happen. It's amazing. But if you go with a mindset of really wanting to connect from human to human, no screen is going to get in your way. And you don't have to take my word for it. Try it. Try your mindset shift as to how to connect remotely. And we've had to learn it the hard way. Okay, like I'm telling you, it did not come second nature. But I think it's a great moment to challenge our own beliefs of how connection between humans works. Okay, you might still think that face-to-face beats everything else. Okay, but just question whether it's 100% true all of the time.
What we experimented is digital webinars, for example, were considered by many participants by more effective than in person. Why? Because when you have a 2 hours or 3 hours or 1 hour and a half or 4 hours webinar, I mean, you have no time to waste in sharing information, in reading in this information, and in reflecting individually. So we had to consider that this task was for the pre-work before meeting in a webinar, in a video conference such as Zoom one. And in order to be able to focus all the webinar in connecting, in working together, in reflecting together, in exchanging everything we prepared in advance, versus how many meetings you have been in where the first half of the meeting is about sharing information, mostly you don't care about, or you just do care about 10% of it or 20% of it, and nothing is happening. And you get out of this meeting extremely frustrated. You just can't do that once in a webinar and never again. So everything that has been developed by the experts in this kind of digital connections, etc., is about connecting and working together. And I can tell you, then after follow-up, connections are much stronger. This is what I've seen. Does that mean that we don't need to meet anymore? Of course not. I would never say that.
The only thing I would add is we have to remember that culture's a group thing. And often there's a leadership team behind efforts, or there's cross-functional teams that are having to learn different approaches to accomplish work. But when culture's involved, or we're trying to adjust something based on an understanding of culture, that work of teams is different than just accomplishing the goal, because often that team has to build the trust of leadership and has to build the trust of members of the organization that aren't on that team. So it really changes the complexion of what teams are trying to accomplish, and how are they getting prioritized feedback from those that aren't on the team? How are they connecting with leadership? But at the heart of it all, I think, is building relationships in that team. And we're seeing many examples where people are learning more about each other remote than they ever did in person, right? And they're seeing the demands, their children, family members, other things. Well, that's not all bad. That's actually can be very good about building relationships and trust within that team. But we have to remember the goal of the team is very different when we've got culture in mind, because then we have to build trust with leadership and with those that aren't on the team, and that's a lot more difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. That was a great question. So that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much, Tim, Thierry, Anabel. I think this was really, really interesting, and we had some great questions asked. Thank you all for asking questions and for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed today's conversation. We're going to share the recording in the next few days, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our next webinars. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.